Welcome, dear listener, to Wishcrafting, the podcast where we explore the mystical, the historical, and the magical threads that weave through our everyday lives. I'm Wishamaya, and today we're turning our gaze to the shadows, to the unseen, to the in-between, where witches find safety. But safety does not mean any less power, because real power is wisdom, and the wise witch knows that magic, too, has its times of concealment and its times of revelation. Across history, witches, wise folk, cunning people, women, and marginalized people of all kind have walked this path using disguises, secret signs, hidden altars, and magical veils to preserve their craft, to preserve their safety, and sometimes to preserve their lives. And today, in a world where oppression still lingers, and many still must choose when and how to reveal their truths, this path is so important to talk about, as it still rings clear and true. For queer witches, for marginalized practitioners, for anyone who feels called to walk between worlds and find safety in the shadows, this particular flavor of wisdom can offer immense power. So, while it is powerful, let's step softly into this space together and explore the magic of disguise, of veiling, and of sacred and often necessary secrecy. Throughout time, witches and magical folk have known this truth. Visibility is power, but so is invisibility. Sometimes the witch is called to stand openly, staff in hand, and at the center of the circle. But oftentimes, the greater wisdom lies in knowing when to mask the self, when to veil the working, and when to encode the spell. Persecution, prejudice, survival, these have all shaped the path of the practitioner. During the various time periods of witch hunts across Europe and the Americas, wise women, cunning folk, and regular women turned to the subtle arts, to household magics, hidden right there in plain sight. Protective charms disguised as folk craft, spells woven into embroidery and lace, or even secret marks carved beneath furniture or on thresholds. We can now recognize certain types of folk art as what could be called magical practice. Magic woven into the very existence and being of cultures. For example, a quilt might bear a protective symbol. A broom leaning against the door could serve as a ward. That is very common in Appalachia and is one of the very early pieces of Appalachian folk practice that I learned from my grandma. I only came to recognize the magic in that practice later on. Also in Appalachia, and common in nearly every culture across the globe, are charms that hang from a child's cradle or bassinet, and this could be dismissed as a simple trinket or superstition to those unaware of the deeper meaning or unaware of the element and energy of magic in the world. But as witches, and here on a witchcraft-based podcast, we can see that that is a talisman, a charm of protection or good fortune or luck wished upon a new baby. It's subtle magic, it's beautiful magic, but it is still magic. Like I've said on the podcast before, the difference between mundane and magical is perception. It all starts with your perspective on the world around you, right? This distinction, and part of the reason why I feel this is so important, is because you can, as a magical practitioner, actually engage with perception as a magical tool. For example, glamour magic. Glamour is a spell, a working of appearance and perception. To glamorize yourself is to magically disguise yourself for whatever purposes you wish. And we have been doing variations of glamour magic for a very long time. For example, in Europe, some were said to wear simple garments that were stitched with hidden sigils, which could be protective or concealing, or they could bring in good fortune, good luck, or whatever else. In some Slavic traditions, knot magic woven into belts or special cloaks would conceal the intention and the working of the one who crafted the knots. Slavic traditions also have very personal, very ancient practices of symbols woven into clothing that are symbols for all variations of intentions. However, I was very lucky enough to have a Slavic therapist who actually was super comfortable with my witchiness, and she taught me about these Slavic practices of weaving magic, the folk practice of weaving symbols with magical intent into the garments of usually your loved ones, but sometimes yourself. Specifically, she told me about one practice from her village that she came from, where the matrilineal line, so the women, would gather for a week to hand sew and hand stitch symbols into a new bride's wedding veil that she would wear on her wedding day. They would make the veil, and then they would come together and they would stitch these symbols all along the edge of the bridal veil. And the symbols were specific to that family. So that family's matrilineal line had created those symbols, and they had passed them down generation after generation after generation. And these symbols wished things like a kind husband, stability, fertility, things like that. But they were very, very personal. The same kind of magic can be employed for any purpose, especially safety, say when you're out in public. A hop, skip, and a jump over, Scandinavian wise women sometimes used hoods or veils to enter trance states, obscuring their human face as they communed with spirits. This is something common that we see in folk practices, using hoods or masks to kind of let the human of us step aside and let spirit in. Many different African traditions use masks and headdresses for that exact reason. Of course, those purposes are vast and deep, but you can see how that is all a type of glamour folk magic. And when we are in a situation where perhaps we're in the broom closet or we need safety when we are in public, we can call on these historical examples of glamour magic that we have as inspiration for the type of safety that we need. Maybe you have a hat or some socks or a favorite piece of clothing or a bandana, but we'll get to veiling on the head in just a little bit. But anything that you wear, your coat, whatever you wear on your person very often, or if you have a article of clothing you really like, or even just your shoes, like your shoes you wear all the time, if you have a favorite pair of sneakers or work shoes or something like that, you can sew magical symbols, sigils, or charms into your clothing, or you can draw with paint on the inside of your shoe for the same purpose. However, today, many witches and practitioners of all identities and paths are reclaiming the art of veiling, which is what I was getting to and is the bulk of today's episode. because it's not just concealment, but a magical act of sovereignty and choice. I was first introduced to the idea of veiling from a palm reader that I met when I was 14 that read me to absolute filth at my ripe age of 14, but that's not the point. She was veiling, and she told me that I needed to veil, and I had no idea what she was talking about at that time until later on, honestly, maybe like 5 to 7 years ago at some point. I was introduced to the creator, Chaotic Witch Aunt, and by introduced, I mean they came across my algorithm, and their name is Frankie. They are an Italian folk practitioner, and they are a massive wealth of information on Italian folk practice and veiling, and they sell veils. I will link that in the show notes if you want to check those out and check out Frankie's work. I highly recommend you do. But for this podcast, I want to kind of give you my rundown and understanding and practice of veiling. So, how does one veil? What is veiling? Veiling is the act of covering one's head for a purpose. In a magical practice, that could be for protection, for connection, or as an offering to a deity, or to feel grounded, to go invisible, or walk through a crowd unseen, or simply just to feel beautiful. Veiling has evolved into something that means to put a literal veil or cloak of magical protection over top of you on your spiritual body, your spiritual field. So creating a magical veil that covers you for whatever reason you employ it to. Not everyone will agree with that definition, but I think in my personal practice and from what I have observed in the modern practice of veiling, putting a enchanted something onto your person is an act of veiling. You are putting a veil between you and the rest of the world, and the rest of the world sees you through that veil, whatever you create it to be. The simplest method is through clothing, like we've been talking about, or adornment. So that could be a scarf, a hood, a hat, jewelry, makeup, sunglasses. These all can serve as intentional veils. And when you place these items on your body, you do so with magical purpose. Notice how I didn't say intent, because we're not just putting on a pair of sunglasses and intending for them to block out anybody's vision of you that isn't for your highest and greatest good. Although, if you want to try that, report back and let me know how that goes. I'm saying purpose instead of intent because oftentimes there is a ritual or enchantment that goes along with whatever you're choosing to veil with. What that can mean is that you do a ritual to magically enchant something before you wear it, or you have some kind of ritual for putting the thing on that activates its power. And that can come with an enchantment or not, just depending on how you like to work your magic. Beyond having an actual item to put on your person, there is some merit to energetic veiling. It comes with the skill of visualization, and this is a skill you can practice, and the more you practice, the stronger your visualization will be. So until you have that skill, I don't recommend using only energetic visualization as your veiling, and maybe having a physical veil while you work on your energetic veil, if that's what you'd like. But energetic veiling is definitely a thing. With this, you can cloak yourself, you can cloak your spiritual body, your aura, and you can use visualization techniques like a soft mist or a energetic cloak over your person a shell or a bubble surrounding you and your energetic field that filters what can come in and what can go out. This kind of veiling is especially helpful in a crowded or hostile space where you want to move unseen or untouched, virtually to be invisible to the crowd. I do this nearly every time I go in public, but I also have a energetic veil that I upkeep every week. And what mine looks like is a goldish shield of radiant energy that is a bubble all around me, and it has a energetic spiritual grid that I have visualized and charged for many, many, many years, over a decade, with the same visualization technique and intention. I also have very specific sigils that I created for my shield that I periodically go in and carve into my shield in the astral visualization space. I've done this for so long, over a decade, that I can really and truly feel when my shield needs work, or if I skip a couple of weeks or something like that, I can really, really tell. And funny enough, other folks can tell as well. I recently went and got an energy healing, and the lovely lady that gave me my energy healing saw my shield, and I did not tell her anything about it, and she had no idea. She was going in blind, but she described it perfectly, and she told me exactly what was wrong with it, where its cracks were as well, and gave me a wake-up call that I was not doing the spiritual maintenance I needed to be doing, and kind of showed me and told me the problems that were coming from that. So now I am back on my upkeep game, and I'm really thankful that I met them, and they were so talented and perceptive at what they did. Anyways, energetic veiling, that is certainly a thing, and don't rely on just that initially. Although I will say, last thing before I move on, there is a certain kind of energetic shielding that you can do, especially if you work with a dark goddess, especially if you work with Hecate. If you are walking alone and you want to keep people out of your path, or if you are in a place where you want people to get away from you, visualizing and projecting an energetic black dog that is super scary and super mean and vicious and ready to tear these people apart, barking towards outside of you, that is a surefire, clear way to keep your space empty and to shield and ward people out of your space. It works for me every time, and I have shared this with folks, and it has worked with them every time, even if they don't have a visualization practice already. So maybe put that in your back pocket and see how that goes for you if you are in a situation where you can work with that. There's also a such thing as digital veiling. In this modern day and age, veiling can extend beyond the physical veiling, beyond the energetic veiling, and into our online presence. And it should extend into our online presence. You can do things like weave protection into the name that you use on social media. You can put protective symbols through emojis into your bios. You can create a egregore spirit that works in the World Wide Web to protect you in the internet space and kind of be your guardian that travels and defeats foes for you on the internet and protects you from creeps on the internet. You can also create sigils or magical symbols and post those on your social media profiles to act as a digital glamour magic shield to keep away those who might have negative intentions towards you online. I'm sure there are so many other ways, but those are just a few of the ways that I have personally taken advantage of, worked with digital veiling on the internet, because the internet, whilst I appreciate it for what it is, definitely can freak me out with its vastness sometimes, and I want to make sure that I'm using and working with and appreciating that vastness in the best possible way and protecting myself. And it is here that I want to speak a much deeper and necessary truth. For queer and POC witches, the hidden path is not often a choice, but a lived reality. Queer and POC folks have always had to navigate between visibility and invisibility. They bear the social burden of extra weight just for their safety. They have to be able to read the room of every room they walk into, to shapeshift in language, in dress, in behavior, just so that they can carve out safe pockets in a world that does not welcome them. And for this reason, many witches have reclaimed veiling as an act of both protection and of affirmation, specifically for wearing veils, having veils on the person, using glamour and self-expression, and I'm sure comfort items as well, as a veil to ward against hostility and the hostile gaze, to bounce the hostile gaze away from them before it even reaches their space, adorning their self in layers that reflect their fluid identity and sacredness and project that outside of them to foster that power around them in their space, using energetic veils as well to choose how and when to engage, to give them a leg up in carving out those safe pockets in an unsafe world. We live in a time where trans and queer and brown bodies are under increasing attack in many, many places. And in these times, witchcraft can be a tool of survival and of resilience in such a world. Veiling specifically says, I choose what you see. I choose who I am in this space. I am not erased. I am sovereign. And I am safe. Of course, there's nuance there, right? I don't want to negate real life threats. I simply want to provide the tools or the inspiration or spark a thought that might help. So I just wanted to say it clearly here on the podcast, my platform, that queer witches, trans witches, brown witches, black witches, they are all keepers of magical wisdom and sovereignty. Their magic, your magic, matters. It matters. And it's so valuable. I know that not everyone is privileged to be out of the broom closet. Not everyone is privileged to walk outside their front door or even be in their house, unfortunately, in 2025, without fear, to just be themselves and be safe. So whether you are working your magic visibly or invisibly, both are sacred and both are so, so important. And to my marginalized listeners, may you wear your veils with pride and with power. May you stand wherever it is that you stand, radiant and full of knowing of your worth, of your intrinsic sovereignty, of your intrinsic power, of your intrinsic value. And may your magic flourish in every chosen moment of concealment or visibility. Now, that makes me emotional. I have many people in my life that are queer, POCs, and trans, and I worry for my beloveds on a regular basis, and I want to do whatever I can to promote safety. I mean, I'm queer myself, but it really hits when I see those I love threatened. So before I get even more weepy, I want to leave you with a couple of other ideas for stealthy spellcraft. The art of stealth magic will continue to thrive. There will always be a need for it. So consider spells woven into your daily objects like we've talked about, or creating a ritual that every time you go through this ritual and put on your veiling object, you activate it, or charmed jewelry that you love, sigils beneath your phone case or in your shoes or under seats of the car that you drive or on your mirror so you see it every day, as well as enchanted words. What I mean by that is a code word. So you could do a ritual just like you might enchant a piece of jewelry. You can write a code word down on a piece of paper and enchant it so that every time you say that word, you are activating a shield or kind of quote-unquote turning yourself invisible magically or whatever you might want. You can do this for other things too, but it really is great for safety and protection. Whatever you choose to do, just know that subtlety and simplicity does not weaken a spell. Oftentimes, subtle, simple magics are the strongest. As we draw this circle to a close and finish out this episode today, I just want you to remember that to hide is not always to cower. Sometimes it is to preserve. Sometimes it is to protect. And sometimes it is to prepare for the perfect moment to emerge fully, gloriously, and standing within one's own power, just as they were before, but now out for everyone to see. Visibility, my friends, is a spell. It is a privilege, and it is a spell, and it is one we can choose to cast or to withhold. In a world of surveillance and spectacle, the right to choose and withhold our visibility is truly sacred. So, wear your veils, physical or energetic, weave your secret symbols and signs, tend to your hidden altars as you will, and know that in doing so, you are walking a path of deep, wise magic. That's all for today's episode of Wishcrafting. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a friend. And if you don't want to do that, consider leaving a comment or a review. They really, really help the show reach more ears and eyes, and I appreciate it so, so much. If you have your own experiences with this kind of magic, with veiling, or if you'd like to add a comment or concern about today's episode, I want to hear that. I am always open to feedback, and I always want to hear from you. I love hearing from you. The way to do that and contact me will be in the show notes. Lastly, you can also find more of my work in the show notes. I have a Patreon where we have corresponding magical posts for each episode over there, and you can join that for only $1. And I also have my Substack, which just launched this August, and over there you'll find monthly astrological forecasts, journal prompts, tarot spread prompts, some of the stranger esoteric topics that I want to get into a little bit more deeply, poetry, musings, and really anything else that I find interesting in the magical realms. That's where that ends up. And you can join that for $5 a month. So, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you being here. Until next time, my name is Wishamaya. Don't forget to keep your roots deep and your dreams wild.